They came from the green hills of Muranga, men and women with nothing but ambition. They came to Nairobi barefoot, carrying hope and hunger. Hope for a better life, hunger for an opportunity, and an unshakable determination to succeed. They would later shape the city's economy brick by brick, shilling by shilling. Today, they own a significant part of Nairobi and a significant part of Kenya. What many cannot believe is that they started as mere hawkers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the Rwathia boys. Meet the boys. Gerald Gikonyo Kanyuria, Rwathia Holdings. Peter Munga, Equity Bank. SK Masharia, Citizen Media Group. Dr. James Mwangi, Equity Bank. John Kibuga Kimani, Kakuzi PLC. Jimna Mbaru, Nairobi Securities Exchange Billionaire. Benson Waidegi of Britam. And Chris Kirubi of Centum. They have two things in common. One, they are huge billionaires. And number two, they all come from Rwathia village. In the years following Kenya's independence, Nairobi was a city of opportunity, raw, growing, and full of promise. But for the young men from Rwathia, the city was also unforgiving. They arrived, one by one, with worn-out shoes, a few coins in the pocket, not sure where to sleep, but with huge dreams. In fact, their first ventures were mostly very modest, with most of them starting as hawkers, working long hours, but saving every shilling, and most importantly, helping one another lives. Where one opened a shop, another opened a restaurant next door. Where one bought property, the others put their savings to buy the next plot. Slowly by slowly, bit by bit, a network began to form. A brotherhood of ambition and grit. They didn't just come to Nairobi to survive. They came to build. And in doing so, they laid the foundations for what would become one of Kenya's most powerful business communities, the Rwathia boys. Our story begins in 1914 in the green highlands of Rwathia, Murang'a County, the birthplace of a man whose name would quietly echo through the history of Kenya's business world, Mzee Gerald Gikonyo Kanyuera. Before he was a billionaire, before the hotels and the buildings, before even Nairobi knew his name, Gikonyo was a farmhand at Mathari Catholic Coffee Plantation in Nyeri, where he was earning just 4 shillings a month. Imagine that. But even then, his mind was restless. With an entrepreneurial spark, he invested his major earnings in goats. And when the herd grew, he sold them and used the money to chase bigger dreams in a distant city, Nairobi. In Nairobi, Gikonyo found work at the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union, better known as KPCU, earning 20 shillings a month. To many, that would have been enough. But to Gikonyo, it was just the beginning. He saved, he planned, he watched how business worked in the city, how goods moved, how property changed hands, and how people made money. After some time, he began hawking vegetables, buying from the market, and reselling to city dwellers. Small profits, yes, but consistent. Every shilling mattered. Then came a turning point: independence. Europeans began leaving, selling their properties for a fraction of their value. Gikonyo, who had by now met some of his friends from Rwathia, seized the opportunity. They began buying buildings and shops, the very structures many Africans thought they would never own. In time, he co-founded the Rwathia Group, a powerful alliance of visionaries who would go on to own some of Nairobi's most iconic establishments: Alpha Hotel, Magomano Hotel, New Kenagop Hotel, and Tiboloa Hotel. But probably the crown on his jewel was the Sabina Joy Building, a landmark whose story is woven into the fabric of downtown Nairobi. Mzee Gerald Gikonyo Kanywera would later become the first African Kenyan to own a car, an Austin, which he co-purchased with a friend for 300 Kenya shillings. It was more than a vehicle. It was a symbol and proof that Africans too could own, could build, and could read. He lived to the remarkable age of 110 years, from a farmhand earning 4 shillings a month to one of Kenya's earliest billionaires, a man whose vision laid the foundation for generations of entrepreneurs from Rwathia and beyond. He was the pioneer, the dreamer who turned scarcity into legacy and hunger into history. In the same quiet hills of Murang'a County, this time in Jagatogo village, but in the same Rwathia location, another figure was born. This time, a boy named Peter Munga. He grew up in a humble home. His father washed clothes. His mother farmed and did manual labor in the plantations. Young Peter did household chores. He herded his neighbors' sheep and cows because his family did not yet own a herd of their own. But despite the scarcity, he studied hard. He went to Mogoiri Intermediate School, but couldn't pay certain fees. He then joined Kiagunyi Intermediate and later Gaishajiro High School, where he completed his Cambridge certificate. His education would become the foundation for a long life mission, lifting up ordinary Kenyans. After school, Muga entered public service. He held several government roles, first in human resources, eventually rising to a senior level. But his dream lay elsewhere. He saw how the rich had access to financial services, while ordinary farmers, traders, and low-income workers were largely excluded. In 1984, with just Kenya shillings 5,000, which is equivalent to $50, Peter Munga took a bold step. He left employment and founded Equity Building Society in Kangema, Murang'a County, not as a bank for the elite, but as a lifeline for the underserved. It was a revolutionary idea, providing mortgages, loans, and a way for the unbanked to save. However, by the early 1990s, Equity Building Society was breeding money. Losses mounted, and everything seems to go wrong. But Munga refused to quit. He brought in a young accountant, James Mwangi, just 21 years old. Someone who importantly shared his vision. These two men together transformed Equity Building Society. They dropped the high-cost mortgage model and refocused on microfinance, reaching farmers, small traders, and everyday Kenyans. Their methods were bold. Their belief was simple. Financial inclusion is not charity, it is dignity. 2004 was a watershed moment. Equity Building Society became Equity Bank. It was just 2 years after President Kibaki rose to power. And just 2 years later, Equity Bank listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. What began as a shoestring experiment had become one of East Africa's most influential financial institutions. Peter Munga's journey was deeply tied to his home, Rwathia location. This was the same region that gave rise to Gerald Gikonyo, the hawker-turned property tycoon. Munga even once worked as a casual laborer in one of Gikonyo's restaurants. Their lives, though very different, were woven together by community, a vision, and a shared sense of purpose. But Munga did not stop at banking. He later ventured into agriculture, founding equatorial nut processors to process macadamia, cashew nuts, and more. He also invested in education. Pioneer Group of Schools and Pioneer International University emerged from his belief that empowerment begins with knowledge. From his humble Rwathia location beginnings, Peter Munga did more than build a bank. He built a legacy rooted in service, rooted in community, and rooted in the belief that ordinary people deserve access to opportunity. Our next titan comes from the same legendary soil, the same rugged hills, the same unforgiving poverty that produced the first generation of Rwathia billionaires. He is not loud. He does not run hotels. You will never see him in the headlines. But he is one of the richest, most silent power players in Kenya today. His name is John Kibuga Kimani. Kibuga was born right inside Rwathia village, the same village that gave Kenya Gerald Gikonyo, the same village that gave rise to the great Rwathia Investment Group, the same village whose sons built half of downtown Nairobi. He grew up under a single mother, a woman who worked on people's farms to survive. Rwathia has produced many giants, but Kibuga's beginnings was the most humble of them all. His mother believed in only one thing: education would save her son. So when school fees became impossible, she worked to neighbors, church members, relatives, anyone who could help. And Rwathia responded because Rwathia has always supported its own. That small community lifted him, shilling by shilling, until he joined Kamasharia Secondary School. That was his doorway out of hopelessness. Eventually, he joined the University of Nairobi. A miracle for a boy who grew up almost with nothing. But even in campus, he lived like a man running from hunger. He studied agriculture. He studied Kenya's economy. He studied markets. And he studied people. But silently, he continued saving. After university, he began working in agricultural research. But it is the Nairobi Stock Exchange that could change his destiny. But he didn't enter the market like most people do, with a lot of excitement. No, Kibuga entered with discipline. He bought shares, one by one, quietly, slowly, month after month, shilling by shilling, just like the Rwathia founders bought shops and plots in Nairobi. His wealth was growing, but in silence. Kibuga became a master of studying companies. He focused on sectors he understood deeply: tea companies, agricultural farms, and essential goods manufacturers. He accumulated massive possessions in Kakuzi, Remuru tea, and others over time. Not for a quick profit, but for decades. In short, he treated the market the way Gerald Gikonyo treated property. Find value early, buy quietly, and wait. Today, John Kibunga Kimani is one of the most influential individual investors at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. He controls billions in shares. He influences boardrooms. He shapes decisions in Kenya's agricultural economy. Yet, he remains almost invisible. The first generation of Rwathia billionaires built hotels, shops, buildings, and entire streets of Nairobi. But Kibuga built something just as powerful: a financial empire. He turned shares into buildings, dividends into farms, and patience into generational wealth. From the same rugged soil that raised Kibunga, from the same community that funded dreams with coins and prayers, rose another visionary, a boy who studied business the way others study survival, a thinker, a strategist, a man who would one day control the corridors of investment banking in Kenya. His name is Jimna Mbaru, and his journey is one of the most extraordinary stories ever to emerge from Rwathia. Jimna Mbaru was born in 1943, right in Rwathia, the very village that gave rise to the creek of some of Kenya's biggest billionaires. Yet his childhood was anything but good. Humble homes, endless struggle, and a burning hunger to rise. His parents had little, but they taught him something priceless: vision. He turned what scraps he found into opportunity, correcting scrap metal in his youth and trading it to survive. As a student at Kirogo Secondary School, he sold scones for 15 shillings apiece, making a 50% profit, not because he needed a hobby, but because he was running business with every bite. He ran margins, he ran demand, and he saved. Even as a young man, he understood that real capital is built with discipline. Jimna went to the University of Nairobi, earning a Bachelor of Commerce degree with distinction. But his dream didn't stop at commerce. He then went to Switzerland, where he completed his MBA at IMD Rosen, and later returned to Kenya to study law, graduating top of his class. He did this not for prestige, but he needed to arm himself with the knowledge that would help him to master both finance and the legal implications of his ideas. In 1983, when few believed in local investment banking, Jimna and a group of Kenyan investors bought Dyer and Breyer stock brokerage from KCB for just Kenya shillings 400,000, which is equivalent to 4,000 USD. Under his leadership, Dyer and Breyer evolved from a small-scale brokerage into a fully-fledged investment bank, formally getting its license in 2004. Jimna had started to find his footing in the banking industry, and specifically where he wanted to be, and that is in investment banking. He later became chairman of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, first as a vice chair and then executive chairman, guiding its modernization. But it is his big deals that would give him the foundation on which he built his empire. And the whole story was happening at Dyer and Breyer. Here, he brokered some of the region's biggest financial moves: the Kenyan IPO, the Safaricom IPO, and the first ever East Africa Development Bank corporate board. These were just a few of the big deals that would change his trajectory, that would give him the first million and later the billions. He would go on to become a major investor in insurance. Indeed, his shareholding in Britam Insurance exceeded 1 billion shillings at one time. He has sat across many corporate boardrooms, shaping decisions, influencing capital, and staying deeply rooted in Kenya's financial future. He even penned a book, Transforming Africa, New Pathways to Development, where he has outlined his vision for African industrialization. His legacy is not built on mansions or flashy cars. It is built on systems, influence, and capital. A man from Rwathia who built a financial engine for Kenya. Gerald Gikonyo, Peter Munga, John Kibuga Kimani, and Jimnah Mbaru. These are the legends who proved that greatness can rise from the most humble soil. But the story of Rwathia is far from over, because there are 4 more men, 4 more unbelievable journeys, 4 more minds that shook Kenya and Africa in ways most people never thought would happen. Stories so inspirational, so unlikely, so powerful, they will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about success. This was only part 1. Part 2 is where the mission impossible happens. coming up next.